A hush falls over the dunes before sunrise. The wind lifts a skin of sand from the plateau, and the silhouettes of the grand pyramids lean into the pale light like patient giants. For millennia they have stood here, holding back secrets older than memory. Then a date cuts through the silence. July 19, 1799. A French soldier marching about 35 miles east of Alexandria during Napoleon Bonaparte's expedition notices a slab half buried near the fort at Rashid. A stone veined with 3 scripts, Greek, Demotic, and a row of tiny pictures that had been mute for thousands of years. The Rosetta Stone becomes a key turned in an ancient lock, a door cracking open to the voices of a lost world. From that moment, the dead language of the Nile begins to speak again, and with it, the lives of a civilization that treated time like a staircase of stone. Egypt is the gift of the Nile, says the old historian, and the line still fits like it was carved to measure. The river is breath and bread. Its annual flood spreads a dark skin of silt across both banks, east and west, setting the rhythm of planting and harvest. The valley itself was shaped in deep time, Miocene ages, cut and recut until it formed the ribbon of fertility that became a lifeline. As each flood receded, the year began, and behind it came the first rhythms of community, then the hum of villages, then the slow-building murmur of cities. Mud, straw, and reed raised the earliest walls. By the end of the Paleolithic, hands were already busy. Arrows and harpoons, querns to grind grain, bone tools, and pottery. Carbon-14 would one day confirm that corn, stored in a Neolithic silo on the edge of Thiam, was harvested between 4,600 and 4,250 BCE. Homes rose from reeds and solid mud. Children learned the tug of the shadoof's arm long before they knew words, and seed fell into black earth that still smelled faintly of the river's breath. A border of water splits a country of sand. Lower Egypt spreads like a fan to the north into the many fingers of the delta. Upper Egypt runs to the south, waking in Aswan. 2 lands, 2 crowns, Hedjet white for the south, Deshret red for the north. Around 3000 BCE, the great unifier Name brings them together, and yet each kingdom keeps its regalia. The pharaohs wear the shent, 2 crowns joined into one emblem of balance. The title lingers, rulers of the 2 lands, order from duality. What looks like stone is really a pact. Before the handwriting of kings, there were the hands of hunters. The predynastic period, about 6000 to 3150 BCE, leaves no diaries, only traces. Cultures are named for where the traces were found, not by the names the people called themselves. Between Egypt and Nubia, the Halfan culture flourishes around 30,000 BCE. From its long shadow come the Kadan and Sabellian cultures by roughly 10,000 BCE, and the Harifan beyond them. Hunter-gatherers become less restless and more rooted, settling in pockets of tenderness where water and forage made life more than just endurance. To the southeast of Giza, a natural basin becomes a cradle. The Fayum oasis, during 9,000–6,000 BCE, holds a people around the hem of a vast lake, Fayum A. They fish, hunt, plant, and weave. Reed houses with cool subterranean cellars keep stores safe from heat and hunger. They domesticate cattle, sheep, goats. Basketry and pottery bloom together like twins. Tribal chieftains rise, sometimes passing power from hand to hand in a family line, as small roving bands thicken into settled communities. As seasons turn, Fayum A gives birth to Merimde, 5,000–4,000 BCE, west side of the delta, where fields are worked by people who still remember the old hunts. The first Egyptian farmers had once stalked herds. Now they sow wheat, barley, flax, and peas, and tend animals under a sky that still watches like a hawk. The land itself lends a hand. The valley's convex shape collects the flood into basins, about 130 of them. ancient irrigation by memory rather than blueprint. Silt and mud settle. Fields drink. Granaries are clay jars or baskets buried up to their necks to keep grain cool and safe. At El Omari, around 4000 BCE, houses grow more complex, circular forms with plastered mud walls. A thought becoming architecture. Lower Egypt, nearer the coast, wakes first. Upper Egypt follows. The Badarian people, still used to tents that move, begin to prefer homes that endure the wind. Then Amratian, Nakada I, homes with windows and hearths, wattle and daub walls, windbreaks at entries that sigh when the desert breathes. Around 3500 BCE, the first experiments in mummification begin, the earliest steps toward eternity. Grave goods, daily tools, beads, bowls are placed with the dead, as if returning a traveler's bag after a long road. Gersian, Nakada Ekin, 3500–3200 BCE, widens horizons with trade. Styles in art and craft change like a river finding a new course. Houses of sun-baked brick appear. Wealthy homes sprout courtyards that trap shade and whisper of later Egyptian elegance. Abydos, north of Nakada, becomes a city of the dead built by the living. Tombs grow large in the sand, first mud brick and then limestone smooth as river-polished bone. Rulers will sleep here. People from distant corners of the two lands carry their dead to this sacred ground and leave gifts to hold memory in place. Somewhere in these centuries, signs begin to speak. The hieroglyphic script is born around 3400–3200 BCE. Its earliest voices scratched into pottery, pressed into clay seals, cut into bone and ivory tablets, many of them found at Abydos. These are not full sentences yet, more like named shadows. Complete sentences wait until the Second Dynasty, during the rule of Peribsen some 500 years later. Nakada III, 3200–3150 BCE, leads into the early dynastic period and recorded history steps onto the stage. Trade threads villages into towns, towns into city-states. Lower and Upper Egypt swell with people and pride. Thinis, Nakada, and Nekhen rise as the three lights of Upper Egypt. Their rivalry burns. Thinis defeats Nakada, then absorbs Nekhen. In the fog of legend stand the Scorpion Kings, Scorpion Must, Scorpion Second, names scratched into mace heads in memory. Beyond them, Ka and Nama. Many see the Scorpion rulers, Ka and Nama, as the last architects of unity. One pushing the door open, the other walking through. Nama invades the north and binds the two lands into one breath. Power needs a language. The early dynastic period, 3150 to 2613 BCE, begins with Menes, often identified with Nama, a ruler of Upper Egypt, Thinis or Hierakonpolis, who subdues nearby cities and then conquers Lower Egypt around 3150 BCE. To braid ties, Nama marries Nithotep of Nakada. Rebellions rise in the delta. He crushes them, and his reach extends into Canaan and Nubia. Cities grow, walls rise, the hum of administration gets louder. Hor-Aha, his son, takes the baton around 3100 BCE. He keeps the armies marching and the ledgers clean, and turns his gaze toward the afterlife. The mastaba tomb, flat-topped, sloping sides, takes its place as the proper house for eternity. Jer follows in 3050 BCE, and then Jet, who marries Merneith. She may rule as regent for their son Den, or perhaps as queen in her own right. In either case, a woman stands at the helm, and records remember it. Den, around 2990 BCE, reigns long and well. 50 years of stability, building, and victory. He appears wearing the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, a man who doesn't just rule a country, but balances two spirits in one hand. After Den, the line stumbles. Anetjib and Semerket deal with unrest, and the dynasty closes with Ka-Ah. Struggle follows. Hotep's Kemwe rises with a name that whispers, the two powerful ones are at peace. He buries Ka-Ah, his name carved at the tomb's entrance. So his epithet is not a victory lap from war's end, but a promise he already carried. The Second Dynasty, 2890-2670 BCE, is a fog of missing dates and repeated names. Raneb-Anebra stitches kingship to divinity, the first to tie a ruler's name to the gods, an early necessary knot. Peripson chooses a different banner. His Seric bears the animal of Seth instead of Horus. Not a rejection of all gods, his reign shows worship across the pantheon, but perhaps a political line in the sand, a southern identity from Upper Egypt that sets him apart from Horus's northern cult. Trade grows, art breathes, temples live. Then Kasekemwi closes the dynasty, building statues at Hierakonpolis and Abydos, reconciling north and south again, and fathering a ruler who will change stone forever, Djoser. The Third Dynasty opens, and Djoser steps forward with Imhotep at his side. The records are uncertain about Sennacht, hazy as heat, but Djoser's imprint is everywhere. Campaigns to Sinai tighten Egypt's grip, and unity creates the quiet required to build. The Step Pyramid at Saqqara rises, 6 stacked mastabas, each smaller than the one below, a staircase for eternity. Earlier tombs were clay brick. This one is limestone, carved to mimic bundles of reeds and carved wood, stone pretending to be plant, then becoming something more. Imhotep is not just an architect, he is vizier, sage, healer, a man later worshipped as a god of medicine and identified with Asclepius in Greek thought. His titles on Djoser's statue, leader of sculptors, chief of seers, are an inventory of genius. The Step Pyramid begins as a mastaba and grows in vision. At 62 meters, it is the tallest building of its time. But the true tomb lies below, a honeycomb of corridors and chambers. Traps and depth are meant to defeat thieves. Time defeats plans. The tomb is plundered in antiquity, the king's body lost. Only a foot remains to accuse the darkness. Yet the idea survives. The Step Pyramid shows what stone can remember, and later builders will push the form until it becomes the smooth triangle the world knows. The Old Kingdom, the Age of Pyramids, 4th to 6th dynasties, spreads like a fan of stone across the desert. The 4th dynasty is a golden blaze. Sneferu, first king of the line, and likely son of Huni by a minor queen, turns failure into blueprint. Meidum's pyramid, perhaps begun by Huni but finished and remade by Sneferu, is now a broken ghost, its casing sloughed into a massive heap, the core like a tower. The reason is simple and costly. Changes to Imhotep's principles set casing on sand, not bedrock. Gravity keeps no secrets. At Dashur, Sneferu tries again, twice. The bent pyramid rises at a 55-degree slope until builders realize that the angle chords collapse. Halfway up, they adjust to 43 degrees. The profile kinks, the bend a scar and a lesson. Then comes the red pyramid, red limestone glowing in late light, built at a safe 43-degree angle on firm ground, 105 meters tall. Egypt's first truly successful true pyramid. Once cased in white limestone, it would have flashed in the sun like a fallen star. Around it, mortuary temples and precincts become a system of ritual care, daily work for priests. Stability is wealth you can't hold, but you can see it in stone. Khufu inherits this momentum. Greeks will call him Cheops and make him a villain in their stories, a tyrant who forced people to labor, colored perhaps by tales from the Westcar Papyrus. 4 stories told by his sons, including the one where a magician reattaches a severed head. But in Khufu's time, Egypt grows fat from campaigns against Nubia and Libya, and from trade with Byblos and beyond. He invests in agriculture and water. At Wadi Garawi, west of Helwan, the world's first documented dam is raised, improving supply to the fields. And at Giza, the Great Pyramid begins, 20 years of logistics and muscle and math. How they did it remains an argument that never tires. Straight ramps, spiral ramps, levers. The truth may be ordinary brilliance that needed no commentary for those who lived it. The interior's geometry: descending passage, ascending passage, grand gallery, kings' and queens' chambers, feeds wonder like a spring that doesn't run dry, and its alignment with the cardinal points sharpens the mystery. Hemiunu, Khufu's vizier and likely relative, supervises the work. He is buried near the pyramid, the overseer of a mountain of stone earning a home in its shadow. The workers are not slaves in chains. They are teams of skilled and unskilled laborers organized by the state, paid in rations, bread, beer, onions, sustenance that tastes of earth and sweat. Some work off debts, some serve in corvée rotations during the flood when fields lie underwater. Some are professionals in stone and rope and wood. The inundation becomes an opportunity. When farming sleeps, monuments rise. Khufu dies. Jedefre, a son outside the expected line, rules. He may have ordered the Great Sphinx. Others say Khafre did. The Sphinx is a lion's body and a king's face, the largest monolithic statue on Earth. Its gaze fixes a horizon beyond time. The face resembles Khafre. The alignment centers on Khafre's complex. Many attribute it to him. Khafre's pyramid is slightly smaller than his father's, but sits on higher ground, making the illusion of equality, his complex nearly as grand. Records of his reign are quiet. Concentrated power, family in key offices, law tight in the king's hands. Succession stalls. Baka, Jedefre's son, takes the throne briefly. Menkaure, Khafre's son, follows. Greeks and Egyptians praise him, a just king, a light hand. His pyramid is smaller, an omen of change. Resources have thinned. He reigns about 30 years, yet cannot finish his complex fully. Quenre, his son and heir, dies during construction. Menkaure's successor, Shepseskaf, completes the father's works and, tellingly, chooses a mastaba for himself at Saqqara rather than a pyramid. The priorities of power have shifted. Around the stone cities of the dead, the living build lives. Priests maintain temples and mortuary cults, houses for workers, breweries, bakeries, copper workshops, storage yards crowd the desert edge. Giza in Menkaur's time is not a ruin in sand, but a humming settlement. Below the elites, peasants work land they do not own. The monarch, his court, provincial governors, nomarchs, and priests hold property. Let us work for the nobility, begins a day. Garden plots near homes, often tended by women, supply vegetables and fruit. The bulk of the harvest goes to the landowner. A share stays with the family. Upward paths exist. Learn a craft, shape clay into bowls and jars, carve wood into beds and chests, paint walls and tombs. Brewers, many of them women in earlier periods, are respected. Beer is daily bread and regular pay. 3 times a day on the Giza Plateau, workers receive their ration, the taste of Osiris's gift, under the eye of Chenenyet, the brewery goddess. Not everything is toil. Children shout in games. Men race reed skiffs and play water jousting on the Nile. Archery contests thrum. Handball and hockey leave scuffs in dust. Festivals, each with its own character, share one rhythm: feasting and drink, laughter that rises like incense. Art settles into standards. The elites fix proportions. Statues of the late early dynastic and early Old Kingdom could be cousins. Precision grows quiet and powerful. The Great Sphinx and the Giza pyramids are the famous faces, but countless smaller works, steles, reliefs, statues, carry the same accuracy of line. Administration becomes an art of its own. The vizier, a prime minister in modern terms, coordinates what the king's 2 hands cannot hold. He assigns responsibilities, channels orders through scribes, oversees provincial governors and public works, taxes, the army. Literacy is a high wall. The literate are few and powerful, and what is not written cannot be argued later. Individuals matter. A strong steward can make a weak king look stronger than he is. A corrupt official can make plenty rot. A story from wood and water shows how the ancients move the colossal. Jehuti Nakht, a 12th dynasty nomarch of the 15th nome of Upper Egypt, covers a tomb wall with the image of his own statue, about 6.8 meters high, dragged by 172 men. Ropes strain. A foreman pours water before the sled to slick sand, a trick that physics will later bless. No one has found that colossus, but the method stands, painted proof of muscle, math, and a jug of water. The fourth dynasty closes, the fifth opens, the Sun King's time. Names braid with Ra, Re, and the Westcar papyrus records their divine birth in a tale. Userkaf starts the dynasty and shifts attention to Abusir with a temple of the sun. The king's aura is not what it was. People can now worship the sun god through priests, not only through their monarch. Userkaf's son Sahuri rules well, sending Egypt's first recorded expedition to Punt, cutting trade deals, building his funerary complex near the Sun Temple, and introducing palmiform columns that will echo across centuries. Punt's goods, incense, resins, rare woods, sent Egypt's halls and dreams. In later tales, Punt will become almost mythical, a land of divine gifts. Neferirkare Kakai follows, respected but faint in records, and the priesthood grows richer. His son Neferefre dies young, perhaps 20. Shepseskar appears briefly. Then Nusere Ini takes the crown, and the priests of Ra anchor deeper. Temples and mortuary estates swell administrative ranks, nibbling at the treasury. Menkauhor Khayu rules next and is the last to build a sun temple, a sunset in slow motion. Djedkare Isesi reforms administration and clergy, reducing the numbers needed to maintain mortuary cults and refusing to build a new sun temple. He sponsors a second expedition to Punt and loosens the grip of Memphis's central power, giving the provinces more say. Una succeeds him and inscribes the first pyramid texts on his tomb's interior, spells, hymns, guidance for the king's soul, the earliest map of heaven written on stone. By the 6th dynasty, the king's aura dims further. Teti, first of the line, is said by later sources to have been murdered by his bodyguards, an unthinkable crime in earlier ages. Userkare follows briefly, perhaps tied to the conspiracy. Pepiwa reigns next as nomarchs grow bolder. Merenre I and then Pepi II follow. Pepi II ascends as a child and rules into deep old age, nearly a century by tradition. Time itself erodes the center. Nomarchs and priests accumulate power. Central authority thins. Famine and drought visit. The state cannot answer. Merenre II's short reign arrives, then Necherkare, by some identified with the Queen Nitocris of Herodotus, who avenges her brother's murder by drowning nobles at a banquet, draws the curtain. With no strong hand to gather the cords, the Old Kingdom dissolves into the First Intermediate Period. The stage shifts, but the music is not chaos. The First Intermediate Period is less a dark age than a different arrangement. Power belongs not to Memphis, but to many local hands. The 7th and 8th dynasties blur into forgetfulness. Names and dates fall away. Memphis fades. Heracleopolis rises with the 9th and 10th dynasties, proclaiming themselves rightful kings. In Thebes, a nomarch of gravity appears, Intef, called the Mighty in later days. He carries the old titles, Great Overlord of the Gnomes, Overseer of Priests. Around 2125 BCE, he plants the flag of the 11th dynasty. Intefai lays the road to unity. A monument in Karnak remembers him. The journey points to a name that will become a bridge, Mentuhotep. The Middle Kingdom gathers itself like a lion standing after sleep. Mentuhotep II is remembered as the unifier, the one who drives the last nails into the coffin of division. But the hammer was already swinging in Intef's hands. Mentuhotep IV and his successors press outward from Thebes, subduing neighbors, weaving loyalties, rewarding friends, and punishing holdouts. When Mentuhotep II finishes the work, beating Heracleopolis and binding the country, he spends his later years governing, building, and campaigning with purpose. His successor, Mentuhotep III, 2010 to 1998 BCE, sends a mission to Punt and fortifies the delta. Mentuhotep IV follows. His 7-year reign is silent in loud ways. No crises recorded. Prosperity intact. In his service stands a vizier named Amenemhat. On a quarry mission, a gazelle gives birth upon the very stone chosen for the king's sarcophagus lid, a sign of fecundity. Rain falls suddenly on the ceremony, opening a well big enough to water the caravan. Later, readers will call these omens the gods choosing a man. Amenemhat becomes Amenemhat I and moves the court from Thebes to Itjawi, south of Memphis, for reasons left to speculation, strategy, oversight, balance. Senusret I, 1971-1926 BCE, follows, improving canals, raising temples, including a shrine to Amun at Karnak that sparks the growth of a monumental complex. Like Intef II and Mentuhotep II before him, he trims the power of nomarchs and the priesthood, keeping the beam level, wealth centralized enough to keep unity, and distributed enough to keep regions loyal. The system works. The White Chapel, a small jewel, records the nomes of Egypt like a census in stone. Nilometers measure flood heights, taxes adjust. The Fayum becomes an agricultural masterpiece under Senusret II, 1897. 1878 BCE. A web of dikes and canals draws sweetness from Lake Moeris into fields. Prosperity spreads not like wildfire, but like water, quietly and everywhere. Corrigency becomes a signature, father and chosen heir ruling together to ease succession. Scholars argue the exact cases, but Amenemhat II and Senusret II likely shared power for a time. Amenemhat II, 1929-1895 BCE, leaves few pages, but his house stands when he leaves. Senusret II is remembered for peace with nomarchs and for prosperity. Senusret III, 1878-1860 BCE, is the Middle Kingdom's thunder, so effective he is deified in his own lifetime. He drives south into Nubia, building fortresses that choke and guide trade and guard the border. He leads into Palestine, turning enemies into partners with goods and treaties. He is the image of the warrior king, decisive, fast, victorious. After him, Amenemhat III builds dams and barrages, Elahun among them, to soothe floods' extremes and feed fields. Planting begins in early November as waters retreat. Repairs to canals and re-evaluation of property lines turn into annual ritual. Tomb paintings show sowing, reaping, threshing, storing. Egypt's agricultural book of hours. Crops are a chorus. Emma wheat for bread and beer, grapes for wine, dates and doom palm fruit, figs and sycamore, papyrus cut into scrolls and twisted into ropes, spread into mats and hoisted as sails. Tools are simple brilliance. The shaduf lifts water, a pole and a bucket and a counterweight in a dance across centuries. In the fields, men and women move with a rhythm set by floods and seasons. In the workshops, potters turn wheels, carpenters fashion beds and boxes, painters color lives and deaths. The economy breathes. Amenemhat III raises the labyrinth at Hawara, a mortuary complex so bewildering in the age of the Greeks that writers swear it out, does legend. Amenemhat IV, 1815-1807 BCE, continues trade, Byblos and Levantine towns, and finishes what his father started. But when the time comes, there is no son to train. The throne passes to Sobekneferu, 1807-1802 BCE. If Nitocris of the Old Kingdom is only a rumor, Sobekneferu is the first woman to rule since the earliest days. She dies without an heir. The 12th dynasty closes like a well-made door. Sobekhotep III, 1802-1800 BCE, opens the 13th. The machinery of the Middle Kingdom still turns, but the hand on the lever is not as strong. The policies stand, but the persons shrink. Then a shift that seems small becomes a crack. The capital moves from Itjawi back to Thebes, loosening the north's leash. Long before, Amenemhat I had planted a settlement at the eastern delta, Utwaret, later Avaris, blessed by roads to Sinai and sea routes. Trade and immigration knit the town to Semitic merchants and families. Over time, some of these Asiatics, Hekaukasut, rulers of foreign lands, later called Hyksos, grow wealthy and then powerful. Theories about their origin swirl and fade. What matters is proximity and patient influence. Treaties and marriages spread their reach through Lower Egypt's districts until they control the eastern delta and beyond. They adopt Egyptian styles and gods, elevate Egyptians to office, and rule as the 15th dynasty from Avaris. The best known among them is Apepi, Apophis, a king with a name that nods to the great serpent Apep, enemy of Ra. At the same time, the south changes. The 13th dynasty has neglected Nubian forts. Soldiers are not rotated home. Garrison towns become permanent settlements. Men who were soldiers become traders, middlemen between Thebes and the growing Kushite kingdom centered at Kerma. Some border forts burn. Blame is unclear. The line between Egypt and Kush softens. Exchange replaces patrol. In the roll of later kings, foreign names appear. The record phrase, "The Hyksos hold the north. To the south, Nubians grow strong. Thebes is squeezed, not crushed." An old story floats out of Manetho. Apepi writes to Sekenenre-Tau, the Theban king, around 1580 BCE, demanding the end of a hippopotamus pool to the east because its noise keeps him awake at night. A thinly veiled insult. Hippo hunts in Thebes violate Hyksos' reverence for Seth and the hippo's place in worship. Tau refuses and marches. His mummy bears the wounds of battle. The Thebans lose. His son Kamose rages in an inscription about paying tribute to Asiatics and dealing with enemies north and south. He attacks so swiftly, says the tale, that the Hyksos women become barren from terror. He claims to have raised Avaris, but 3 years later the city still stands, and the Hyksos still rule the north. Kamose's brother Ahmose takes up the cause. An inscription in the tomb of Ahmose, son of Abana, tells the story. Avaris is besieged and falls. Survivors retreat to Sharuhen in Palestine. Ahmose pursues and besieges for 6 years until the Hyksos flee again into Syria and vanish into the fog of other people's lands. Ahmose I opens the new kingdom, the 18th dynasty, and shapes empire. He has learned the lesson. Foreign powers settled in Egypt because the gates were not watched. So he builds strong places at the edges, fortifies neglected towns, and patrols seams. He campaigns in Nubia and keeps an eye on Palestine and Syria. Amenhotep I, 1541-1520 BCE, continues the pattern. Warrior king by model, though records show battles more surely in Nubia than the north, and the borders hold. Thutmose Wast, 1520-1492 BCE, steps onto the stage in iron and gold. A revolt in Nubia erupts. He leads the charge, kills the Nubian king himself, and hangs the corpse from his ship's prow, a warning sculpted in flesh. He pushes south into Nubia, then pivots to Palestine and Syria. He adds to Karnak and spreads stone across the land. Thutmose II, 1492-1479 BCE, follows and is quickly eclipsed by his half-sister Hatshepsut, who will become one of Egypt's most effective rulers. Thutmose III, the son by a minor wife, is named successor. When Thutmose II dies, Hatshepsut becomes regent and co-ruler, and the true hand on the tiller. She builds magnificently. Her terraced mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari is a cliff turned into music. An expedition to Punt returns successful. Obelisks rise like frozen sun rays at Karnak. Later, kings will chisel her name away and claim her works. Her memory is a contested field. In Aswan, the unfinished obelisk still lies in the granite, a cathedral of intention. Quarries tell truths that finished monuments hide. After Hatshepsut's death, Thutmose III inherits a realm ripe for empire and does not waste the fruit. The Syrian city of Kadesh stirs rebellion. Allies gather at Megiddo. Thutmose chooses the narrow Aruna Pass, dangerous, unexpected, emerges behind enemy lines, and drives them to the city walls. The siege is long, the victory total. Over 2 decades he conducts at least 17 campaigns, taking Kadesh and Syria, hammering Mitanni, extending Egypt's reach farther than ever before. Chanani, his military scribe, records the war so vividly that the king has passages carved into Karnak's walls. The enemy wretched, the strategy precise, the outcome inevitable. After him, Amenhotep II, 1425, 1400 BCE, rules a stable empire, prefers treaties and building to constant war, and keeps peace with Mitanni. Thutmose IV, 1413-90 BCE, follows, remembered for the dream stele at the Sphinx's chest, a story that he was promised kingship if he cleared the sand, and for attention to the Giza Plateau. Amenhotep III, 1386-1353 BCE, presides over Egypt's golden afternoon, wealth, art, diplomacy. He builds on a scale of confidence, not panic. But in the calm, a rival power grows, the priesthood of Amun. Their estates and incomes outstrip even the kings. Amenhotep allies himself with Aten, the sun disk, hoping to counterbalance Amun's priests with another cult anchored to the throne. The attempt raises Aten without lowering Amun enough, and sets the stage for a rupture. Amenhotep IV takes the crown and changes his name, Akhenaten. He lifts Aten to the only true god, shutters temples, silences Amun, moves the capital to Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and orders a new art of long heads and tender scenes. Nefertiti's face, shaped by the sculptor Thutmose, becomes the icon of a revolution. The old order is broken, foreign affairs suffer. When Akhenaten dies, his young son Tutankhamun reopens the doors, changes his name to Tutankhamun, returns to Memphis, restores Thebes as the spiritual heart, and tries to stitch the old cloth. He marries Ankhesenamun. He dies around 18. His tomb, buried and forgotten, will one day open to lamplight in 1922 and pour treasure into modern eyes. After him, the Vizier I briefly holds the crown. Horemheb, a general, takes power and burns Amarna's memory. Statues smashed, inscriptions erased. Aten's temple at Karnak torn down. Tradition returns with a vengeance. Horemheb dies heirless. His vizier Paramesu becomes Ramesses I, founding the 19th dynasty. He is old. He hands the sword to his son Seti I and dies. Seti I is a restorer and a soldier. He retakes lands lost in the north, builds at Karnak with a steady hand, and prepares his son to rule. That son, Ramesses II, 1279-1213 BCE, becomes the pharaoh whose shadow touches every ruin. 67 years on the throne. Temples at Abu Simbel carved into living rock. Hypostyle halls thick with columns like stone forests. Obelisks and statues everywhere. And at Kadesh in 1274 BCE, a battle that becomes legend. The Hittites, rising in Anatolia, challenge Egypt's northern holdings. Ramesses must deal with an enemy that Akhenaten had too often ignored. He gathers 4 divisions at Pi-Ramesses: Amun, Re, Ptah, Set, about 20,000 men. Scouts report the Hittite king Muwatalli II is far away. 2 Bedouin prisoners confirm it. They are spies. Muwatalli waits just beyond a hill with 3,500 chariots and 37,000 troops. Ramesses arrives with his Amun division far ahead of the others. The Hittite chariots smash into his camp. Messengers fly. The Ptah division arrives in time. Ramesses rallies, charges again and again, pushes the Hittites toward the Orontes River. For reasons historians still puzzle over, Muwatalli does not commit reserves from Kadesh's walls. The city does not fall to Egypt. The Hittite army is not annihilated. Each side claims victory. Ramesses writes his version large. Hittite records claim their own. Years later, the first known peace treaty in history is inked between the two powers, and a royal marriage seals it. Merneptah, Ramesses' 13th son, becomes king because his older brothers died during that long reign. He fights Libyans and turns back a wave of sea peoples. His stele mentions Israel as a people for the first time in Egyptian record. The 20th dynasty opens, and Ramesses III stands as the last great bulwark. The priests of Amun continue to grow. The monarchy's light flickers. The sea peoples push along the coast, burn Kadesh, threaten the delta. In 1180 BCE, Ramesses defeats them. They return stronger. He avoids open field battle, sets ambushes, stations archers hidden along the beaches and river mouths. Flaming arrows kiss ships, crews drown or die under shafts. On land, he repeats the tactic. In 1178 BCE off Suez, the sea peoples break. Prisoners are forced into the army or sold. The threat ebbs. Victory is expensive. The treasury thins. The tomb builders at Deir el-Medina are not paid and stage the first recorded labor strike in history. Men who carve eternity refuse to work until today is made right. Assassins wound Ramesses III. He dies of his injuries. After him comes a sequence of Ramesses IV to Buapin, each struggling against shrinking borders and swelling priests. A crisis flares in Thebes. High priest Amenhotep is deposed by the vizier Pinehesi and flees to Nubia. The details blur. The pattern is clear. The priests of Amun hold the keys now and will soon hold the crown. Smendes, 1077-1051 BCE, takes Lower Egypt at Tanis and buries Ramesses XI. Asserting right by tradition, the successor buries the king. Upper Egypt, however, follows Herihor, high priest of Amun and general. The country splits without civil war. Power is local, influence limited. The third intermediate period is a chessboard with many small kings and a few priests who are kings in all but title. The 22nd dynasty, Libyan in origin, unifies briefly under Shoshenq I, 940–922 BCE. He reforms Tanis and Thebes. The god's wife of Amun becomes an office by royal appointment, not birth. Campaigns into the Levant revive wealth. Egypt glows faintly with new kingdom memory. Osorkon II maintains the unity. After him, the land fragments into seats at Heracleopolis, Tanis, Sais, Memphis, Hermopolis, and Thebes. To the south, the Kushite ruler Kashta, c. 750 BCE, reads Egypt's weakness and moves carefully. He loves Egyptian culture. Napata is Egyptianized in ritual and art. His son Piye pushes farther, conquers Lower Egypt when the Delta kings resist, then returns to Napata, leaving local rulers in place under his shadow. Boundaries change meaning. Buffer states shrink. When Shoshenq I had subdued Judah and Israel, Egypt's northern border now leaned against Assyria, a dangerous neighbor with no cushion. Centuries turn. In the 26th dynasty, Psamtik I restores pride with renovations, projects, and military order. His son Necho II, 610–595 BCE, continues, building fleets crewed by Greek mercenaries. Egyptian seamanship has long been modest, and strengthening borders. Amasis II reforms spending, sparks the economy, and steadies the nation. The streets fill, temples shine, commerce flows again. Then Psamtik III, young and untested, faces Persia. Cambyses II demands Amasis send him a daughter. Amasis sends the daughter of Apries instead, hoping to avoid insult and war. The deception is exposed in Persia, and the insult becomes a fuse. Persia takes Egypt. Under Darius I, from 522 BCE, policy softens. He adores Egypt from a distance, visits twice, funds temple repairs, dedicates new shrines, honors local gods. Tolerance becomes tool and principle. But the empire needs Egypt's resources. Xerxes I asks much, and after defeats at Salamis and Plataea, withdraws from bold foreign ventures to build and to tend court. Artaxerxes I spends 6 years crushing a major Egyptian rebellion, 464–154 BCE, led by Inaros II, son of a Libyan prince, encouraged by Athens. The Persians will be driven out for a time. Egypt will reclaim its voice under the native 30th dynasty. Then Persia will return. Through it all, Egyptian culture persists. Kings come and go. Festivals and fields endure. At the end of one long book and the beginning of another, Macedon rises. Philip II is murdered in 336 BCE, with plans to crush Persia already laid. His son Alexander takes them up and walks through fire with them. The last native pharaohs, Nectanebo and his line, build and restore as if to prove that identity can be carved into stone as a defense against time. The late period ends, but Egypt does not. Civilization survives its conquerors by echo and inheritance. A thread runs from the ancient river to the present. Modern Egypt, 21st century, still steps to the Nile's music. Spring festivals carry ancient fragrances. Dishes on Cairo tables taste of old kitchens. The last living form of the ancient tongue, Coptic, survives in church prayers and in phrases tucked into the Arabic dialect. Pride is not a museum label. It is a parade at night. Lights sweep across gilded coffins as royal mummies move to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. In Luxor, the Avenue of Sphinxes wakes from centuries of sleep, and people applaud not just from patriotism, but from recognition. The past is a family member. New cities rise, highways slice through rock to make commerce move like a river. On the Giza Plateau, a new Grand Egyptian Museum, one of the largest in the world, prepares its halls. Excavations cut into dust. New finds lift into sunlight with a hush that always follows a miracle. Somewhere under sand, a sealed door waits with a silence like Tutankhamun's, ready to shift the balance between what is known and what is guessed. This land remains a magnet for wonder, not because of mystery alone, but because mystery here always comes with evidence. Names in cartouches, fiber ropes, chisel marks, bakeries for workers, bones with stories, and a calendar etched into stone. And so the story continues, from flood to harvest, from glyph to voice. A soldier in 1799 bends, wipes dust from a black stone, and the past begins to speak. The Nile rolls on, gift and judge. The pyramids hold their angle against the wind. The old crowns, white and red, still appear in carvings tourists trace with their eyes. The double crown endures as an idea, two different truths held at once and bound together. That is what made Egypt endure. That, and a river that remembers. The stone that unlocked the silence did not speak all at once. After the French soldier pulled it from the ground near Rashid, the Rosetta Stone passed through hands and tempers, moved as war booty, and traveled by ship to a different empire. Scholars prodded its surfaces like physicians testing for pain. Greek was the thread, Demotic the braid, and the holy pictures, hieroglyphs, the knot. Thomas Young tugged first and loosened strands. Jean-François Champollion, with a lifetime's obsession, pulled the knot apart in 1822 and shouted what he had long suspected. The signs were not mere symbols. They were sounds, names, grammar, breath. Pharaohs introduced themselves again. Gods and festivals arranged their calendars. Merchants wrote receipts. Stone stopped being mute. Once the glyphs were heard, the quieter scripts stepped forward. Hieratic, the quick cursive hand used for letters and accounts, appears as the everyday shadow of the monumental style. Later, Demotic will do the same, a script for contracts, grain lists, court rulings, and notes to a neighbor. Papyrus carries the voices, slender stalks slit, soaked, pressed in crossing sheets, and dried into pages that rustle like reeds in a hot wind. In the house of life at temples, scribes learn on potsherds and limestone flakes, ostraka, scratching practice lines. Writing is better than the scent of lotus, better than a sun, better than a house. The schoolmaster's reed pen taps time against the margin, ink pools like night. Numbers join letters. The civil year fixes at 365 days, 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 days beyond the months like a small raft tied to the calendar's stern. Festivals knot those extra days to memory. Astronomy watches the sky as a farmer watches water. The star Sopdet, known later as Sirius, returns at dawn in summer, signaling the flood's approach. Pyramids track the cardinal points with a precision that prefers understatement. Temples receive the rising sun on chosen mornings as if the building itself had sight. Trade is a river with many tributaries. In Sinai, turquoise veins stain rock. The miners carve prayers into cliff faces and leave their names among the hammer marks. From Wadi Magara and Serabit el Kadem, expedition leaders bring back stone the color of sea shallows. Copper gleams from the desert's ribs. At Wadi Hammamat, the road of caravans cuts between Nile and Red Sea. Quarries there supply the dark grey grauwak for statues that look like they might exhale. From Byblos comes cedar, tall and straight, wood that holds a ship together and a palace roof level. Punt contributes incense hard as amber, myrrh saplings with their roots wrapped for transport, leopard skins that smell of wildness when unrolled in a temple courtyard. Nubia brings gold, rings of it, bars of it, dust like sun captured in a sieve, and ebony black as sleep. The accounts are bold and exact. Quantities, weights, days away, men dispatched, men returned. The work gangs that raise pyramids leave joking names scratched into casing blocks. Friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkaure, enduring gang. A crew leader takes pride in a straight line of stones laid over a week, the way a mason anywhere would. Nearby, bakeries produce conical loaves by the thousands. Breweries tend clay vats that foam and sing. Butchers quarter cattle. Potters wheel jars by feel. A physician, part scientist, part magician, sets a broken arm with linen splints soaked in gum and writes a note about prognosis. The two great solar boats buried beside Khufu's pyramid lie disassembled for centuries. When reassembled in modern time, the cedar hull's long curve answers questions no text could. In the quieter rooms of houses, life keeps a different schedule. Children play Senet, a board game where pieces step through the hazards of chance toward a safe field. Mayhen, the game of the serpent, coils over the table, throwing sticks clack and spin. Women grind grain on querns, their hands repeating the same arc their mothers taught them. A tall jar of beer murmurs at the threshold. In courtyards, cats patrol and snatch birds from mid-leap. Dogs sleep in the good shade and raise one ear when a stranger's sandals scuff the street. Musicians pluck harps and strum lutes at feasts. A double pipe pours two notes at once over tables heavy with bread, onions, cucumbers, dates, and, where rank allows, roasted goose or slices of beef. Perfume cones melt slowly on shaved heads, releasing scent that keeps the heat from feeling like a weight. Marriage contracts spell out dowry and property. Divorce is a matter of accounting and agreement. A woman can own land, bring a lawsuit, run a business, and be remembered with the same stone seriousness as a man. In one village, a brewer named Ippi leaves the brewery to her daughter and writes the terms in a hand that looks both stubborn and pleased. The law is not a code written once, but a set of habits enforced by scribes and elders who have read the same documents for generations. Not all verdicts are fair. Some are very fair indeed. The papyri show both. The care for the dead mirrors the care for the living, methodical, skilled, and practical. Early burials in hot, dry sand preserve bodies by accident. Later methods preserve them by design. In the Old Kingdom, the elite's bodies are dried with natron, the flesh firmed into time's idea of a person. By the New Kingdom, the process is a choreography. Brain removed through the nose, viscera lifted through a cut in the left side and packed in canopic jars, heart left in place, seat of thought as well as feeling, lungs, liver, stomach, intestines protected under the signs of 4 suns with animal heads. The skin is packed and wrapped in linen, amulets tucked at the throat and wrists and over the heart, a mask placed to give the face a face. It is a technology of respect. The texts that accompany the body change over the centuries. Pyramid texts carved in stone for kings, coffin texts inked for nobles, later spells compiled into what modern readers call the Book of the Dead, really going forth by day. Practical instructions for safe passage. The tone remains more manual than sermon. A guidebook for a journey everyone understands will be exacting. If the Old Kingdom is the architecture of certainty, and the Middle Kingdom the governance of balance, the New Kingdom is confidence that sometimes flirts with overreach and genius that sometimes walks alone. After Akhenaten's experiment unplugs the nation from its own habits, the restoration under Tutankhamun, I, and Horemheb proves that continuity can be broken and repaired, but never without scars. The erasures at Karnak are not merely political. They reveal how much records matter in a culture that treats writing as a second skeleton. To remove a name is to weigh down a soul. To inscribe it is to give it another spine. Ramesses II's long reign casts a light that throws shadows. He covers the land with his name, orders statues so numerous that a traveler can begin to think stone is a kind of forest, and signs a treaty that makes two empires breathe easier. At Abu Simbel, the seated colossi face the desert with a kind of composure that makes visitors speak softly. Twice each year, the sun reaches into the temple's deep corridor to touch the back sanctuary, washing the seated gods and the king's image in light. Alignment like that is not luck. It is patience with numbers, the skilled stubbornness of surveyors who spend dawn after dawn watching shadows crawl. Later, Meneptah's stele marks tribes and towns with the coolness of a ledger, even as it boasts of crushed enemies, and Ramesses III maps out war with an economist's pen. The strike of the Deir el-Medina artisans reads like a modern report. Missed wages, petitions, negotiations, delivery of rations, return to work. There is even a phrase that tastes like sarcasm. The men who cut royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, halls that echo with the footsteps of tourists today, once put down their tools and insisted on bread and beer before eternity could be carved again. As the third intermediate period advances, the country resembles a braided rope fraying at the ends. Tanis and Thebes share a crown neither can completely wear. The god's wife of Amun becomes a political office with real budgets attached. Libyan chiefs import their own styles of rule and marry into lines that keep the chessboard crowded. The Kushite kings appear from the south, speaking perfect Egyptian in stone, devout in temples, strict in protocol, wielding a kind of borrowed antiquity as authority. Pi leads, Shabako follows. Monuments speak of renewal with a conservative's comfort. The Assyrians loom. Shoshenq's campaigns north had erased buffers that once slowed invaders. Each success has a shadow. The closer a border to a great power, the louder the drums at night. Sais rises in the western delta with Psamtik I. A renaissance warms the workshops. Naucratis becomes a Greek-speaking port where copper scales swap weights with Attic amphorae. Mercenaries drill in courtyards where priests pass with incense. The Saiti style returns to old kingdom forms with a craftsman's wink. Surfaces are smoother, lines cleaner, proportions so exact that the old looks newer than the new. Amasis II tightens expenses without strangling festivals. The economy responds. Ships from all horizons knot the harbors. In one street, a mason points with his chisel at a block of stone and argues about payment. In another, a Greek sailor learns enough Egyptian to order wine and throw dice without being cheated. Then Persia arrives with a logic that is not local. Cambyses burns hot. Darius coaxes. He leaves temple endowments intact, praises local gods, and writes his generosity into stone with the tidy self-regard of empire. Egypt functions within a larger map. Xerxes uses Egypt as one branch of a great machine and, after costly defeats in Greece, turns inward. Revolt follows revolt. Persian generals march. Some shrines are defaced, others are repaired. The record is not a single mood, but a series of adjustments. Native kings return. The 30th dynasty tries to pretend time can be reversed by will and skill alone. And for a moment, it works. Nectanebo's builders chisel as if the calendar were a suggestion. Then Persia comes again, and after that, a different wind moves across the Mediterranean. Macedonian boots scuff Egyptian dust. Alexander arrives with a glare that annuls borders. At Siwa Oasis, the oracle answers questions the way oracles do, with words that make sense to those who want them to. A new city called Alexandria is laid out along a bright coast, straight streets, a grid that looks like the skeleton of reason, harbors that can swallow fleets. The library gathers books as if knowledge itself were a resource that could be mined. The Museion shelters scholars who argue about Homer like surgeons, slicing stanzas to weigh syllables. The lighthouse at Pharos, later counted among the wonders, throws a tower of fire and polished mirrors into night so that captains can steer even when stars hide. The Ptolemies adopt old titles and old rituals. Coins carry Greek profiles and Egyptian crowns. Bilingual decrees multiply on stelae. A family keeps marrying itself until politics and blood turn into riddles. Cleopatra VII learns languages and turns diplomacy into theater. Rome watches and then does what Rome does. The empire that began with a river becomes a province that still looks like a river grown up into law. The thread is uncut. Coptic speech rings in prayer. Arabic wraps around it like a cloak stitched later, but worn daily. The spring festival, once called Shemu, becomes Sham el-Nasim and smells of salted fish and green onions. The Shadouf's silhouette marks distant fields long after motors arrive. The newest highways bite the sides of limestone hills in the eastern desert, revealing strata like pages in a book that remembers when the Nile ran a different path. In Cairo, engineers calculate tolerances for a museum large enough to house an idea of the past. At Saqqara, a team brushes sand from a sealed shaft, and the stale air that comes up smells of natron and cedar oil. At Luxor, a child leans across a railing and stares down an avenue of ram-headed sphinxes whose sandstone hides the tool marks of hands that have been dust for 3,000 years. The applause at the Mummies Parade is not for resurrection. It is for continuity that refuses to apologize for itself. The secret of Egypt is not that everything is hidden. It is that everything is layered. A dam in Old Kingdom stone at Wadi Garawi anticipates modern regulation of the river. A strike papyrus reads like a union memo. A quarry graffiti in Sinai might as well be a field report from a manager posting to a project board. An account of a royal envoy to Punt. How many men, how much water, which route, what tribute, is project management without spreadsheets. The bending of Sneferu's pyramid is an engineering change order visible from space. The shift from pyramids to hidden cliffside tombs is a security policy responding to risk. The Hyksos are not phantoms, but the result of immigration plus opportunity plus inattention at the border. The Persians' gentler years prove that empires can be tolerated when they respect what they find. The Macedonian embrace of Egyptian ritual shows that conquering is easier when one wears the local crown with plausible grace. Even the way buildings align with the sky is not mysticism run wild, but surveyors rehearsing the same dawns until the sightline is right. The avenue at Karnak receives the sun during festivals because teams stood and adjusted, again and again, moving the planned axis by a hand's breadth, then by a finger's width, then by less than a nail. At Giza, pits for the solar boats are cut with quiet certainty. When a cedar plank is lowered, the foreman says nothing, because what needs to be said has been said for months. At Deir el-Medina, when a workman complains about short rations, he writes the complaint on an ostracon with handwriting that shows he has written many complaints before. Continuity is not a miracle. It is a set of habits. If the story needs an epilogue, it is this. The sands keep their secrets not out of malice, but out of patience. The Rosetta Stone waited until artillery blew a fort wall open and exposed it. The unfinished obelisk waited in its quarry until archaeologists could understand the channels and wedges that freed it from the bedrock. The buried workshops on the Giza Plateau waited until the right trench was cut. The tomb of a man named Wa, buried with sandals, a walking stick, and a letter that reads like a conversation, waited until a lantern's flame curled the shadow up a plastered wall and revealed a sealed doorway. Even now, a valley that looks like bare ground holds a cache of coffins stacked like books in a chest, painted faces looking up at darkness, waiting for air. The Nile still rises and recedes, moderated by modern reservoirs, but not defeated by them. The two crowns become a logo in museums and a line on tourism posters, but they also remain an accurate diagram. Duality held in balance, the white and the red, upper and lower, flood and drought, order and improvisation, stone and papyrus, kings and scribes, past and present. Egypt is at its strongest when opposites are allowed to share the same space without one devouring the other. And somewhere north of Rashid, Rosetta, the sea lifts its salt breath against a wide mouth of river. If a visitor walks the shoreline and kneels to pick up an ordinary shard of something black and smooth, it will not be the stone that made the dead speak, but it will be part of the same coastline, the same air, the same long story, names in cartouches, teams named like jokes, dikes and ditches, palms moving along a canal in a slow procession of green, and above it all, those three shapes against the sky at Giza, disproving day after day the idea that the past is gone. The voice that began with a soldier's shout in 1799 continues. Not louder, just clearer. Translators finish each other's sentences across centuries. Archaeologists argue like family. Conservators keep glue recipes as secret as bakers. Guides point with silvered wands at reliefs and explain wars and weddings in two languages at once. A visitor, any visitor, can stand before the great stones and feel the odd calm that comes from understanding that time is not a straight line here. It is a river. It floods and recedes. It leaves a film of silt that makes things grow. And so the grand pyramids keep their angle. The Sphinx watches the road. The valley temples hold coolness even in August's glare. The workers' village still smells faintly of ashes after rain. The museums raise glass walls so that light can touch old gold. A barge on the Nile slides past a farmer using a shadoof that would make a man from the Middle Kingdom nod in approval. A child tastes date syrup on flat bread and licks a finger, not because it is ancient, but because it is good. This is the gift of the Nile and the gift of memory. Not the promise that nothing changes, but the promise that what matters knows how to endure change without losing itself. The stone that once told the king's names in 3 scripts did one more thing. It taught the modern world to listen carefully. Because when a civilization this old decides to speak, the proper response is not noise, but attention. The desert is not silent. It is just quiet on purpose. The wind combs the sand. The plateau answers by standing still. And when a new shaft opens and the first breath from a sealed chamber touches the face of someone holding a light, the sound that follows is always the same. Not a shout, not a gasp, just the low, involuntary word that humans say when they recognize something both foreign and familiar at once. Enough.